Chapter 1. The Beginning. A group of friends and the mystery of the missing money. Max had always cherished the simplicity of his high school life. Surrounded by his four closest friends, Leo, David, Anhasta, and Yutori, he found comfort in their shared experiences and mutual support. Their bond was forged through years of laughter, challenges, and the unspoken understanding that they would always be there for one another. Their friendship was built on a foundation of trust and the belief that nothing could come between them, not even money. They had often joked about how, unlike the dramas they watched, their group would never fall apart over financial issues. This belief was put to the test when their class planned an upcoming field trip, requiring each student to contribute to a collective fund. The excitement was palpable as the trip approached. Students buzzed about the destinations, activities, and the memories they would create. Max and his friends were particularly enthusiastic, often discussing their plans during lunch breaks and after-school hangouts. However, the atmosphere shifted dramatically when the class representative announced that the entire fund, amounting to 2 million yen, had vanished. The news sent shockwaves through the class, accusations flew, suspicions arose, and the once harmonious environment became tense. Max and his friends were stunned. They had all contributed diligently and couldn't fathom who among them could have taken the money. The idea that someone within their circle might be responsible was unthinkable. Wikipedia, La Enciclopedia Libre. Despite thorough investigations by the school administration, no culprit was identified. The unresolved mystery left a cloud over the class and the planned trip was canceled. Max and his friends tried to move on, but the incident lingered in their minds. A few days later, an unexpected event occurred. Each member of Max's group received a mysterious envelope containing a letter. The letter stated that they had been selected to participate in a special game designed to test the strength of their friendship. The instructions were vague, but the promise of resolving the issue of the missing money was enticing. Curiosity and the desire to clear their names led them to follow the instructions, which directed them to a secluded location after school. Upon arrival, they were greeted by a peculiar figure, a man dressed in a mascot costume named Manabu. He explained that they were now participants in the Tomodachi Game, a series of challenges aimed at evaluating the depth of their friendship. Manabu revealed that someone among them had secretly enrolled the group into the game to pay off a personal debt. The total debt amounted to 2 million yen, the exact sum that had disappeared from the class fund. The revelation was shocking. The implication that one of them had betrayed the group was almost too much to bear. The rules were simple, yet cruel. By participating and succeeding in the games, they could reduce the debt. However, failure would increase the amount owed. Moreover, the games were designed to exploit their secrets, fears, and trust in one another. Despite their reservations, Max and his friends agreed to participate, hoping to uncover the truth and preserve their friendship. As the first game commenced, tensions rose. The challenges forced them to confront uncomfortable truths and question each other's integrity. Max found himself grappling with doubt. Could he truly trust his friends? Was their bond as strong as he believed? The games tested not only their knowledge of each other, but also their willingness to sacrifice for the group's well-being. As the games progressed, the group's unity began to fracture. Accusations emerged, alliances shifted, and the line between friend and foe blurred. Max struggled to maintain his composure, determined to uncover the truth and hold the group together. The experience was harrowing. Each game peeled back layers of their personalities, exposing vulnerabilities and past mistakes. The pressure mounted, and the once unbreakable bond they shared seemed to be unraveling. In the midst of the chaos, Max discovered inner strength he didn't know he possessed. He became a pillar for his friends, offering support and guidance even as his own doubts threatened to consume him. His determination to see the group through the ordeal became a beacon of hope. The Tomodachi Game was more than a series of challenges. It was a crucible that tested the very essence of their friendship. Through betrayal, revelation, and reconciliation, Max and his friends faced the ultimate question: Could their bond withstand the trials ahead, or would it shatter under the weight of truth and deception? Chapter 2. The game begins. Trust fractured. The air was thick with tension, the kind that coils around the spine and refuses to let go. Max, Leo, David, Anhasta, and Yutori stood in a dimly lit chamber that looked more like an abandoned television studio than a game room. A single screen glowed in the center of the wall, its blue light flickering like an electric heartbeat. Their shadows stretched long and distorted across the cold tile floor, reflections of a friendship already beginning to fray. Just hours before, they had been living their normal lives. Now they were trapped in a bizarre and twisted game orchestrated by an entity calling itself Manabu, a grinning, anime-styled mascot whose voice was too cheerful to be anything but sinister. The revelation still echoed in their minds. Someone among them had submitted their names to the Tomodachi Game in order to repay a personal debt. And to cover the entry fee, that same person had stolen the 2 million yen class trip fund. It was a betrayal too fresh to ignore. "Welcome, dear friends," Manabu chirped from the screen, his smile unnervingly wide. "It's time to begin our first game, Kokuri-san." The group exchanged wary glances. The name struck an eerie chord, reminiscent of ghost stories they once shared in dimly lit rooms as children. But this was no harmless game. Manabu explained the rules, and the chill in the room deepened. Each participant would write a lie about another member of the group, a believable but false statement. These would then be read aloud. If the lie was believed to be true by the majority, the writer would earn a reduction in their share of the debt. But if the lie was too far-fetched, they'd receive no benefit. The goal was clear: sow doubt, reap suspicion, let the fractures bloom. Max sat frozen, pen hovering above the paper. The rules were simple, but the implications devastating. Every sentence would be a blade aimed at trust. He glanced at his friends. Leo was tapping his foot nervously. David wore a mask of calm, but his clenched fists betrayed him. Yutori, usually quiet and composed, looked pale and withdrawn. Anhasta, always the peacemaker, was biting her lip, eyes darting between them. Max finally scribbled something down about Leo. Leo once stole money from his part-time job. It was false, completely. But it wasn't unbelievable. Max remembered a time Leo had lied about where he'd gotten money for a new phone. It had seemed minor then. When everyone finished, the slips of paper were collected. Manabu, grinning ear to ear, began to read them aloud. Leo once stole money from his part-time job. Leo's eyes widened. "That's not true," he blurted. The others were silent, but the seed had been planted. Max felt his stomach twist as Leo looked around, searching for support that wasn't there. David cheated on a test and let someone else take the fall. David's expression hardened. "I would never do that." Manabu continued to read the lies, each more damning than the last. Yutori uses her shy act to manipulate people. Anhasta sabotaged a group project so she could shine. Each statement hit like a hammer. Even if they weren't true, they lived in the realm of possibility, close enough to hurt, close enough to doubt. Max couldn't stop his mind from wandering. He remembered times when David had received mysteriously high grades, when Yutori had cried her way out of consequences, when Anhasta had smiled too sweetly after taking credit for a shared success. He shook his head, trying to fight the paranoia. These were lies, designed lies, but they clung to his mind like burrs. Yutori was trembling. "I can't believe any of you would think these things about me," she whispered. Anhasta reached over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "These are lies. They want us to break. We can't let them." But the damage had been done. Invisible lines had been drawn. Trust was no longer a given. It was a calculation. When the final lie was read, Manabu clapped his white-gloved hands. "Wonderful! That was deliciously chaotic. Let's see how your debts have shifted." A chart flashed on the screen. Max saw that his debt had dropped slightly. David's had increased. Yutori's had remained the same. Leo's had risen. "Some of you are better liars than others," Manabu giggled. "I wonder what that says about your friendship." No one spoke as they were led out of the room. The hallway beyond was long and quiet. It could have been minutes or hours before they reached the small dormitory where they were to rest. Dinner was silent. No one could meet each other's eyes. Even the act of eating felt like a betrayal. That night, Max lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He hated that the game had worked. He hated that he was beginning to question his friends, who had submitted their names, who had stolen the money. He thought he knew them. He thought they were real friends. But real friends didn't lie. Real friends didn't play games like this. The next morning, a new envelope was slid under their door. Another game. Another round of doubt. They gathered again, this time with less hope in their eyes. Max looked at each of them, Leo, David, Anhasta, Yutori. He remembered their laughter, the way they used to joke around after school. He remembered sleepovers, secrets whispered under blankets, promises made under the stars. And now every word felt like a trap, every glance a calculation. He clenched his fists. No more. Max made a vow. He would protect his friends, yes, but more than that, he would uncover the truth. He would find the betrayer, even if it hurt, even if it meant turning every stone. Because if the Tomodachi game had shown him anything, it was this. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it cuts deeper than any blade. Chapter 3. The Climax. The betrayer and Yuichi's ruthless mind. The Tomodachi game had already begun to chip away at the fragile trust that once held the group together. With each round, their bonds had been tested, and the once inseparable five now found themselves navigating a minefield of doubt, manipulation, and suspicion. But nothing had prepared them for the revelations and ruthlessness that lay ahead. The group sat in the holding room, the tension palpable. After the emotional toll of the first game, they had grown wary of each other and of the sinister nature of the game itself. Yuichi, who had thus far remained calm and composed, stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Then came the announcement. Manabu's voice rang out through the speakers. "Congratulations on surviving the first game, but now the stakes will rise. It's time for Game 2, Friendship in Debt." The rules were more convoluted this time. Players would answer questions in secret, with points allocated based on their answers and how others ranked them in terms of trustworthiness. Any disparity in answers would create penalties, and most dangerously, secrets could be revealed through a vote-based mechanic. It was a setup not just to test friendship, but to destroy it. And then came the bombshell. Someone in the group had voluntarily signed them up for the Tomodachi game in the first place. The room went cold. Yuichi's eyes narrowed. "Someone here betrayed us. One of our own." Shiho gasped. Makoto's hands trembled. Tenji avoided eye contact. Yutori looked like she might cry. It was the first time Yuichi spoke with a commanding, almost chilling tone. "We'll find out who it is, one way or another." As the second game progressed, Yuichi began to show a side none of them had ever seen. Calm under pressure. Calculating, strategic. He didn't just participate in the game, he played it. He anticipated the mechanics, suspected who would crack under pressure, and subtly manipulated choices and alliances. When questioned, he would flash his usual smile, disarming those around him. But behind those eyes was a razor-sharp mind turning every moment into a calculated move. One of the questions asked players to identify the least trustworthy person in the group. Yuichi voted without hesitation. He didn't vote based on feelings, he voted to draw reactions, and it worked. Makoto flinched when his name came up. Yuichi noted it. Tenji snapped at Shiho during a discussion. Yuichi logged that too. He began building psychological profiles, not just reacting to the game but shaping its direction. Then, during the results round, Yuichi's suspicions bore fruit. A special mechanic revealed that the person who entered the group into the game had their debt initially reduced by a massive amount. The scoreboard showed it. Tenji. The group exploded. "You did this!" Shiho screamed. "Why, Tenji?" Yutori demanded, tears in her eyes. Tenji couldn't speak. He looked at Yuichi almost pleadingly. Yuichi stepped forward, his tone ice cold. "Let him speak," Tenji finally confessed. "I had no choice. I was in debt. I thought if we played together we could pay it off. I didn't know it would turn into this." His voice cracked with guilt, but Yuichi didn't flinch. "You knew what you were doing," Yuichi said. "You used your friends as pawns." That was the moment things shifted. Yuichi, once the moral compass of the group, now stood as its tactician, its shield, and its sword. In the following days, Yuichi's tactics became bolder. He anticipated the next game before Manabu even explained it. He devised strategies, sometimes using deception. He staged a fake argument with Shiho to test Yutori's loyalty. He planted misleading clues. He started controlling the narrative. Makoto began to fear him. Yutori respected him, but also sensed danger. Even Tenji, who had once thought he could outplay Yuichi, realized he had never understood the depths of his mind. But Yuichi wasn't acting out of malice. He had one goal: protect his friends at all costs. He told himself that if he had to manipulate them to save them, so be it. If he had to become the villain in their eyes to ensure they didn't suffer, he could carry that burden. The third game, Silent Majority, was brutal. Players were forced to vote on each other's secrets. The more popular a secret, the more points gained. But if a secret turned out false, a punishment followed. Yuichi used the opportunity. He suggested a secret about himself. Yuichi once stole exam answers. It wasn't true, but he used it as bait. Most players voted yes, believing it. He took the penalty willingly. Why? Because the next round, when a secret about Shiho came up, Shiho sabotaged another student's project. Yuichi defended her, swayed the vote, and protected her reputation. He took the fall to shield her. But Shiho didn't see it that way. She confronted him later. "Why did you lie? Why did you let them think the worst of you?" Yuichi smiled gently. "Because I can take it, you can't." By now, the group dynamic had changed completely. Yuichi wasn't just a friend. He was their protector, their strategist, and sometimes their tormentor. The others followed his lead, sometimes out of trust, other times out of fear. Even Manabu took note. "Yuichi Katagiri, you're quite the player." But Yuichi remained focused. He kept a journal, tracked clues, predicted patterns in game design. He suspected there was a deeper conspiracy behind the Tomodachi Game, one targeting not just money but morality, testing how far someone would go to protect or betray. One night, as the others slept in the holding dorms, Yuichi sat alone, reflecting. He looked at a photo of the group taken before the game. "I'll get us out," he whispered, "even if it means losing myself." And so, as the games continued, Yuichi leaned further into his role. He learned how to read micro-expressions. He manipulated outcomes. He played the villain when it suited the strategy. The once cheerful boy with a kind heart had transformed into a ruthless tactician. But one question remained unanswered. How far would he go? And when the time came to choose between victory and friendship, what would Yuichi decide? The climax had only just begun. As the games progress, the group's unity continues to erode. The revelation that one among them had orchestrated their participation in the Tomodachi Game to settle personal debts serves as a catalyst for further distrust. This betrayal forces each character to reevaluate their relationships and the authenticity of their friendships. Yuichi Katagiri, the protagonist, emerges as a complex figure. Initially portrayed as a kind-hearted individual, he reveals a strategic and at times ruthless side. His actions, though often morally ambiguous, are driven by a desire to protect his friends and uncover the truth behind the game's sinister nature. In a harrowing turn of events, Yuichi is subjected to a sadistic game orchestrated by Kuroki, a new antagonist. Enduring physical torture to protect his friend Kokorogi, Yuichi's resilience and cunning are put to the ultimate test. He challenges Kuroki to a high-stakes game of rock-paper-scissors, leveraging his injuries to outwit his opponent. Yuichi's victory not only humiliates Kuroki but also exposes the depths of his own strategic mind. However, the toll of the game leaves Yuichi gravely injured. His friends, recognizing the sacrifices he has made, rally to support him. Tenji and Yutori in particular are faced with a choice: abandon the game or continue playing to save another friend, Makoto Shibe, who is burdened with a massive debt. Their decision to proceed underscores the enduring bonds of friendship that persist despite the betrayals they've endured. The resolution, reflection, and redemption. As the series concludes, the characters are left to grapple with the aftermath of their experiences. Yuichi's actions, while controversial, are ultimately revealed to be part of a larger plan to dismantle the Tomodachi game and expose its creators. His willingness to bear the burden of betrayal and manipulation highlights the complexities of his character and the lengths to which he will go to protect those he cares about. The final scenes depict the characters embarking on paths of personal growth and redemption. Yutori, for instance, is shown pursuing a career as a mangaka, a nod to her creative aspirations and a symbol of her resilience. The series leaves readers with a powerful message. While betrayal can fracture relationships, the potential for forgiveness and the restoration of trust remains. Themes explored betrayal and trust. The series examines how betrayal can undermine relationships, but also how trust can be rebuilt through understanding and sacrifice. Moral ambiguity. Characters are often faced with decisions that challenge their moral compass, highlighting the complexity of human nature. The nature of friendship. Tomodachi Game questions the true meaning of friendship and whether it can withstand the trials of deception and hardship. Title: The Price of Victory, a Tomodachi game. Conclusion: the final stages of the Tomodachi game brought with them a weight heavier than any previous trial. The games had been cruel and calculating, each one more twisted than the last. Trust had been shattered, friendships had been eroded, and in the center of it all stood Yuichi Katagiri, a boy who at the beginning would have done anything to protect his friends. But now that same boy was no longer recognizable. He was something else, something monstrous. It began, as it often does, with a choice. Yuichi had a decision to make: protect the ideals he had clung to since the start, or abandon them in order to win. At first he struggled. His moral compass trembled under the pressure, but each new game, each act of betrayal by those he once called friends, dulled the edges of his conscience. He became sharper, more calculating, willing to sacrifice trust for strategy. In the game of manipulation, he was no longer a pawn, he was the player. The final round was the most brutal yet. It required more than just logic or cunning, it demanded complete emotional detachment. The rules were simple in theory, but excruciating in practice. Pit your friends against one another, manipulate their fears, and expose their darkest truths. The winner would walk away free with their debt erased. The losers would be left broken. By this point, Yuichi had learned the truth. One of his own friends, someone he had once trusted, had entered them into this twisted game to cover their personal debt. That betrayal cut deeper than any rule of the game, and in response, Yuichi made a decision that changed everything. He would become what the game wanted. He lied, he manipulated, he twisted emotions like a knife. One by one, he isolated his friends. He exposed Tenji's secret insecurities, laid bare Shiho's hidden jealousy, played upon Makoto's desperation to belong, and shattered Yutori's fragile trust. And yet through it all, he wore a smile. Not out of malice, but because he had to. It was the mask required to win. Yuichi didn't just play the game, he became the game. And when the dust settled, he stood alone. Victory, total and complete. But at what cost? He had won, yes, the debt was gone. The other players were broken, psychologically scarred, emotionally devastated. They couldn't look each other in the eye. The trust that once bound them had been incinerated. They were no longer friends. Some might say Yuichi had done what was necessary, that in a world ruled by manipulation, only the strongest, those capable of making the hard choices, survive. But others would look at the wreckage and see a boy who had lost everything, even himself. The Tomodachi game was never truly about money. It was about trust, loyalty, the essence of human connection. And in the end, it proved that even the strongest bonds could be severed when tested by fear, lies, and desperation. Yuichi, now changed beyond recognition, stepped into the next phase of the game not as a victim or hero, but as a creature born of betrayal, a monster crafted by a system designed to crush innocence. He smiled, not because he was happy, but because he had accepted what he had become, and the game was far from over. Reflection. The ending of Tomodachi Game is not a conclusion in the traditional sense. It doesn't offer resolution or peace. It offers a mirror, a chance for viewers and readers to reflect on the cost of manipulation, the limits of friendship, and the darkness that can grow in even the kindest hearts when pushed far enough. Yuichi is not a villain, nor is he a hero. He is both, and neither. He is what the game made him. This final chapter leaves us with more questions than answers. Will Yuichi ever reclaim his humanity? Can broken friendships ever be mended? Or is trust once shattered, gone forever? Tomodachi Game ends not with a sense of closure, but with an open wound, a story that dares to ask if survival is truly worth the price of losing oneself. And as Yuichi disappears into the shadows of the next trial, we are left to wonder, what would we have done if it had been us in the game? Chapter 5. The strain of friendship and unraveling bonds. As the tension of the Tomodachi Game escalated, so too did the strain on friendships that had once seemed unshakable. The participants, Yuichi, Tenji, Shiho, Makoto, Yutori, and David, had entered the game with a shared goal: to win. But the very nature of the game, with its cruel twists and devious psychological manipulation, began to fracture the delicate bonds they had built. Their relationships, which had once been rooted in trust, camaraderie, and shared experiences, now began to unravel as the game revealed darker aspects of their personalities, the shifting dynamics. Initially, their friendships had been simple. There was laughter, shared meals, late-night talks, and dreams for the future. But with each passing round of the game, those familiar, comforting aspects began to fade. What remained was a distorted reflection of what their relationships had once been. Yuichi, once viewed as a calm, rational thinker, began to reveal his true nature: strategic, manipulative, and cold. As the game intensified, so did Yuichi's need for control. His internal monologue was marked by a sharp contrast between what he was willing to do for victory and what he once believed in. He had made a pact with himself. The goal was survival, and friendship had no place in that equation. On the other hand, Tenji, once seen as the group's jokester and carefree spirit, began to show signs of desperation. His constant need for validation clashed with the increasing weight of the game, causing cracks in his personality. Tenji, unable to cope with the loss of his innocent nature, began to spiral. His jokes became fewer, replaced by moments of panic and frustration. He no longer knew where his true self ended, and the version of him created by the game began to take over. Shiho, always the level-headed one, tried desperately to hold the group together. She believed in the power of friendship and refused to let the game destroy the bonds they had. But even her strong will couldn't prevent the creeping doubt from poisoning her thoughts. In her eyes, Yuichi's calculated behavior became less of a strategy and more of a betrayal, and she struggled to reconcile the person she had once trusted with the ruthless player before her. Makoto, too, was torn between his deep-seated loyalty to his friends and the overwhelming sense of betrayal he felt. His love for Yutori had always been something he kept to himself, a secret buried deep within his heart. But as the stakes in the game grew higher, his feelings for her began to surface. This created a volatile mix of emotions, especially as he watched her grow closer to Yuichi. The tension in his chest grew tighter with each passing day, and jealousy became his constant companion. He could no longer tell if his feelings for Yutori were driven by love or the game's manipulation. Yutori, the most reserved of them all, had always been an enigma to the group. Her quiet nature masked a deep well of thoughts and emotions that were now surfacing in ways none of them had expected. The game's emotional manipulation targeted her the hardest. She was constantly forced to question her friendships, her worth, and her role in the group. As the game drew on, Yutori found herself drifting further from the people she once held dear. Her growing attraction to Yuichi added another layer of complexity to the already fragile relationships. Where did loyalty end and personal desires begin? David, the outsider in the group, found his alliances shifting as the game revealed his own hidden insecurities. At first, he had joined the game as a mere participant, but as the stakes became higher, his need for power and control became more pronounced. David started to view the others not as friends, but as mere pieces in his own personal chess game. The psychological toll of the game distorted his view of their relationships, and he began to manipulate situations to his advantage, all while hiding his true motives. The unseen threats: love, jealousy, and betrayal. While the game's challenges physically tested their endurance, it was the emotional strain that truly fractured their bonds. Love, jealousy, and betrayal intertwined in a twisted dance, each character's feelings becoming more distorted as they interacted with each other. These emotions weren't just the byproducts of the game, they were the fuel that kept the emotional intensity burning hot. Makoto's jealousy of Yuichi's influence over Yutori became a driving force in his actions. What began as a quiet admiration for her transformed into a fierce, possessive longing. When Yutori started confiding in Yuichi more than him, his trust in her shattered. He no longer saw the woman he loved, but instead a traitor, someone who had chosen Yuichi over him. The betrayal stung deeply, and he couldn't help but lash out in subtle, passive-aggressive ways. Each word Yuichi spoke to Yutori seemed to burn him from the inside out, and with each passing day, his resentment grew. Yutori, caught between her growing feelings for Yuichi and her loyalty to Makoto, began to question her own worth. Was her affection for Yuichi real, or was it merely a response to the way he controlled the game? She had always prided herself on being independent and self-sufficient, but now she found herself torn between two conflicting desires. Her friendship with Makoto had always been a source of comfort, but Yuichi's sharp mind and unyielding confidence had a magnetic pull on her. She couldn't deny the attraction she felt, but she couldn't ignore the guilt either. She was being manipulated, yet she was too emotionally entangled to break free. Yuichi, of course, played this emotional web to his advantage. His calculated interactions with Yutori were not born out of genuine affection, but from a deep understanding of how to control the people around him. His ability to make each person feel uniquely special was his greatest strength and his greatest weapon. Yuichi had come to see people as tools, moving them on the board like chess pieces. He played on their insecurities, feeding their desires, and using their vulnerabilities to further his own agenda. But what Yuichi didn't realize was that even his cold manipulation was starting to take a toll on him. The lines between friend and foe had blurred so much that he could no longer distinguish between who was on his side and who had become a pawn in his game. As the game continued, betrayal became inevitable. There were moments where the characters were forced to choose between their personal survival and the survival of their friendships. They had all been thrust into this game under false pretenses, but now, the very bonds they once shared were weaponized against them. Their interactions became increasingly tense as each player's true intentions were slowly revealed. The breaking point: a friend or an enemy. The game had been a test of loyalty, but what had started as a group of friends fighting for survival had transformed into a battlefield where no one was immune from betrayal. As each character's personal motivations began to take center stage, the friendships that had once defined them crumbled into nothing more than broken promises and shattered trust. Yuichi, ever the strategist, became the true embodiment of what the game had done to them. He had emerged from the chaos not as a victim, but as a winner, albeit a hollow one. His victory was a victory not of strength, not of friendship, but of manipulation. He had used his friends' emotions as tools, turning their deepest fears and desires into weapons that worked in his favor. In the end, the game didn't reveal who was truly the most deserving of winning. It revealed the true cost of winning. The destruction of friendships, the loss of trust, and the emotional devastation were far greater than any financial gain. The game had promised that only one could come out on top, but what Yuichi and the others failed to realize was that the real cost of their victory was their humanity. As the final round approached, Yuichi stood at the precipice of his victory, but the price was clear. The faces of his former friends, now enemies, stared back at him with expressions of betrayal and grief. Yuichi had won, but he had lost everything that truly mattered. The question remained, was it worth it? And so, as the game reached its conclusion, Yuichi stepped into the next round, not as a friend, but as a predator, cold, calculating, and capable of seeing betrayal, not as a flaw, but as a necessary strategy. The friendships he had once cherished were gone, replaced by a relentless pursuit of victory. The Tomodachi game was not just a test of loyalty, it was a test of what one was willing to sacrifice for survival. Yuichi's laughter echoed in the darkness as he prepared for the next stage of the game. The monster he had become was not one he could escape, and with every victory, the cost of that transformation grew higher. The game was far from over, and neither were the scars it had left behind.